Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Avi Havivi's weekly Siddur class.
This week and next week, we're going to go slightly on a side path. We're not going to be talking about the Siddur as we generally do it every morning, but we're going to talk about Hasidic ideas about personal prayer as separate from the Siddur. We know we've talked, on and off about the balance between fixed prayer, the words in the Siddur, and adding spontaneous things at various parts in the Siddur. So Hasidim, some of them also had an idea that besides davening times in the Siddur, we should also have times to pray to God privately, having nothing to do with organized synagogue services. This generally is called Hitbodedut. The Hebrew word badad means alone, and Hitbodedut in the Hitpael is a reflexive conjugation. So it kind of means alonification, to make yourself alone. As a grammatical word, it means to make yourself alone. And in this context, it means to have your own individual audience, I guess, as it were, or talking time to God or with God, being alone with God. Now, if you remember back to the beginning of Hasidut, we talked about the first concept, devekut, cleaving, right? That the whole purpose of davening or mitzvot is to have an experience of cleaving to God. A big difference between the Jewish mystical tradition and other mystical traditions is in Judaism, you can never merge with God, according to the theory. You're always separate. You want to come as close as possible. Whereas in certain other mystical traditions, the purpose of certain meditation practices is actually to merge with the ground of all being. They call it, in fancy theology words, unio mystica, which means the mystical union. So scholars always point out that in Judaism, you can't fully have unio mystica. God is always somehow separate or beyond. Think back to the Sfirot, the 10 aspects of God we talked about in Kabbalah, and think about Keter, the highest Sfirah, or the Ein Sof, the infinite. There's always something beyond, which is ineffable, which means incomprehensible, ununderstandable, that we cannot grasp. So no matter how close you become, no matter how much your devekut, how sticky your devekut is, your devekus, there's never fully a merging. But along the lines of devekut, striving to cleave to God, there's a Hasidic idea of Hitbodedut, that everyone should make times to be one-on-one with Hashem, as it were, not necessarily having anything to do with Shachrit, Mincha, and Mariv, not having anything to do with fixed prayer. So we're going to look at two thinkers on this. One, the one who really made famous this idea of Hitbodedut, Rabbi Nachman, who was a 18th century Hasidic master, and then we'll look next week at a 20th century Hasidic thinker about this. Okay? So we're going to look at Rabbi Nachman, or Nachman of Bratslav. They're still around, the Bratslaver Hasidim. They're known as the Hasidim without a Rebbe. All the other Hasidic dynasties, the Rebbe appointed a next Rebbe and a next Rebbe and a next Rebbe, except, of course, for the most recent Lubavitcher Rebbe. That's an exception. But whereas the Bratslaver Hasidim, who are still around and pretty popular, certainly in Israel, are known as the Hasidim without a Rebbe, because after Rebbe Nachman died in the mid to late 1700s, he was never replaced, right? So they're a dynasty without a dynast, as it were. Okay? So let me screen share, and we're going to read, if I find it, pretty sure that's it. There we are. Rabbi Nachman on Hitbodedut. Okay? Alonification. And this is all online at Sefaria. Most of Rabbi Nachman's teachings he wrote a number of books, but his kind of biggest collection of teachings is in a book called Likutei Moharan, and Moharan stands for Morenu Harav Rabbi Nachman Moharan. That's how he's abbreviated. And Likutim means selections or collected selections. Okay, so Likutei Moharan. There's a section 1, section 2. If you go look for it on Sefaria, it's in section 2, 25:1. Okay.
Could you zoom in a little to make this bigger?
I don't know. How's that?
Wider at the lower.
Yeah.
How's that? Compromised? Good. Okay. If I make it bigger, then I can't see you guys. So, okay. Hitbodedut hu ma'ala elyona udula min hakol. Hitbodedut is the highest attribute and more important than everything. What does it mean? To set aside for oneself at least an hour. And Rabbi Nachman would say daily. Okay? Hitboded, I underlined this word so that you see the relationship of the Hebrew. Hitbodedut, which is translated, I didn't translate it as Hitbodedut, but Hitboded means to seclude oneself. That's a nice kind of technical or flat translation. To seclude oneself in a room or a field. We don't have a lot of fields, but we're talking about a Eastern European Rebbe from the 1700s from a village. Okay, so where might you go to be alone? The field. Where's the other place, Hasidim? Where do many Hasidic stories take place? Outdoors. Where's their outdoors? The forest. Okay, once a man was wandering in the forest. So they have fields, they have forests. We might say, I don't know, going for a walk up and down the block or sitting in the park or something like that in our. So in a room or a field, and using, I'm not crazy about the English translation, I just took it as is from Sefaria, using claims and excuses. I'm going to say Hebrew te'anot, which means arguments, and amtlaot, explanations, excuses, to b'divrei chen uritzui ufius, gracious words that are conciliating and placating. 2, levakesh ulahitchanein, those are familiar Hebrew words from davening, to request and to plead before the Blessed One. What are you requesting and pleading for? Sheyakarvu elav lavorato be'emet, that you will be brought closer to genuine divine worship. By the way, what's not clear in the Hebrew here is, are you pleading to be brought closer, like that is the focus of your pleading, or is the whole experience of pleading, the experience of purpose, the purpose of the pleading, now I'm going to take it back, so I'm going to reframe that. Is the goal of what you're pleading for to become closer, or is pleading a method to become closer so that you can plead? Is it the technique on the way? Is it the means? Or is it the end? Not 100% clear here, okay? But we'll kind of maybe get more of a sense of it later. Utfilah v'zichra zo yeh b'lashon shemidabrim bo. This prayer and conversation should be in the language that people speak. By the way, notice, I just want to point this out in Hebrew, dahainu b'lashon Ashkenaz b'mdinatenu, which means in the language of Ashkenaz, where we live, in our country. That would mean, for Rabbi Nachman, Yiddish, okay? Ashkenaz being Germany. It says, we speak Yiddish, okay? So you should talk to God in Yiddish. You should talk to God in one's native tongue, says Rabbi Nachman. That means Yiddish, okay? Because that's for Rabbi Nachman, that was the native tongue, right? You should speak in your language. For us, it would be English. Why? Because it's difficult for a person to articulate what they want in Hebrew, because most of us don't speak Hebrew well enough. Since we're unfamiliar with it, one's heart is not moved by the word. But in our native tongue in which we normally speak and converse, it is much easier and much more likely for one to feel contrition. This is because the heart is drawn to a person's native tongue and closer to it on account of your familiarity with it. That makes sense. You want to really have an intimate conversation with God, speak the language that's most familiar to you. Uvelashon Ashkenaz yachol lefaresh kol sichato. In Yiddish, we would say, in English, everyone can explain oneself fully, okay? Everything that is in your heart, you should express and tell to God, be it remorse and repentance for the past, in Hebrew, charata utshuva, regret and teshuvah, or plea to be closer to God from this day forward, bakashat tachanunim, a pleaful request, okay, or the like, or whatever it is you need to pray for, each one according to your level, right? Wherever you're at. This suggests to us, well, I don't know, I think this suggests that what I said at the end of paragraph 1, well, still not clear, is getting yourself closer to God, the means, speak English, say what's in your heart and talk to God, get close to God so that you can say what you really want to say. Is that a means, or is that the end? The purpose of all this is to be closer to God. Still not entirely clear. Okay, going down. And you should do this daily practice at a scheduled time every day. Usha'ar hayom yeh b'simcha. The rest of the day you should be joyous. Okay. Now, on the one hand, this seems, wow, who has the time for this? On the other hand, we have in our culture people who say, I do yoga or I meditate every day. I'm a psychiatrist. It's lots of times when I say to a patient, it might help you with your anxiety if you learn to meditate and set aside 10 to 20 minutes twice a day to meditate. All right. There's studies that show that that's helpful for anxiety or depression. So, on the one hand, Rabbi Nachman's suggestion / demand seems like a lot for most of us. On the other hand, we live in a culture where a lot of people say, yeah, I have a daily practice. So he suggests this should be a daily practice. You need to go to a private place. I think later he's going to talk about talking out loud. It's got to be a private place so you can talk out loud. He says it would be talking out loud, not thinking. Okay. It's got to be private. You don't want to worry about who's looking at you, who's overhearing you. Do they think that person is a crazy person because they're talking to themselves, right? So private place, set aside a time every day, scheduled time, okay? Sha'ah miyuchedet, right? Midei yom yom, every day, sha'ah miyuchedet, specific time. The benefit of this practice is extraordinarily great. Try to get the Hebrew in there. I'm at the top of the second page in English. It is an extremely good path and guideline for drawing closer to God because it is a universal guideline. I don't really like universal. Klaliyut means general. Shekolel hakol, which includes everything. I think what he means by this is, sometimes you're sad and you want to tell God that. Sometimes you're needy and that's what you want to communicate to God. Sometimes you're joyful and that's what you want to communicate to God, with God. So no matter what's in your heart that day, it's an opportunity to share any of that. This is kind of, I'm going to use the word antidote, exactly the right word, let's say counterbalance or something, a balance, to what a lot of people say about the Siddur. Well, it doesn't speak to me because I wouldn't say these words. Rabbi Nachman says, great, find time to speak your own words, okay? Whatever is in your heart at that moment. Okay, so if you do this practice, Psuke de Zimra is about praising. You may not feel praisey this morning. You may feel sad this morning. Rabbi Nachman says, he doesn't say don't do Psuke de Zimra or do this instead of Shacharit. This would be in addition to Shacharit. He says, find time to talk to God privately about whatever is in your heart, okay? And this draws you closer to God. Interesting. Next paragraph, the second paragraph in English on the second page. No matter what a person is lacking in worshiping God, a lot of us would say, well, I don't know that I believe in this. I don't know what this means. I don't know what it means to talk to God. Even if what you're lacking, even if you feel totally and absolutely distant from God's service, okay, you should speak about it all and ask it of God. So even you don't feel that you know how to do this or believe in this, you should do it anyway. Al kol ma shechaser lo sheyechsar lo b'avodat Hashem. Whatever it is that's lacking in your service of God. O im hu rachok legamre mikol v'chol me'avodato yitbarach. Even if you experience yourself as very, very distant from God's service, you talk to God about all of it. even if a person's words are sealed and he cannot open his mouth to say anything at all to God, this itself is nonetheless very good. That is, your readiness and presence before God, your yearning and longing to speak, despite your inability to do so. This in itself is also very good. You want to practice yoga, meditation. You're bad at yoga. You don't know what to do. The fact that you yearn to do your practice is good enough. Moreover, it's possible to make a conversation and prayer out of this itself. A person should cry out and plead to God about this very thing, that you've become so distant that you're unable to even speak. One should beg God for compassion and grace, that God would take pity on the person and open their mouth so that they will be able to express themselves before God, right? So this is about you are praying for the ability to pray. Vida, and no, many Hasidic passages conclude with this. It means, so the point is, okay, that many kamat tzadikim gdolim mefursamim sipru shelo ba'u l'madregatam rak al yidei hanhagazo. Many great tzadikim, righteous people, famous ones, would say or told that they only were able to achieve their level, presumably here it translates as spiritual level, because of this practice. Perceptive individual will understand by themselves the great benefit of this practice, which rises higher and higher. Meaning, I think it means, we would say, you get deeper and deeper at it. The old concrete Jewish metaphor of God is in the heavens and the heavens is up, which we know is not literally true, but we all still sort of somehow, think of that metaphor or make use of it. And thus we say, when you practice, he says, you practice this, you get higher and higher. I think if people talked about in modern parlance about, let's say, a meditation, we call this a meditation practice, we'd probably use the image deeper and deeper. Okay. Furthermore, hu davar hashaveh l'chol nefesh mikaton ve'ad gadol. This is a practice that is equal for anyone, whether you are small or large, meaning, the smallest, most humble, we talk in Hasidic terms, shepherd, up until the greatest, most highly evolved spiritual master or most sophisticated theologian. This is something that's accessible to everyone. Anyone can do this practice, or everyone can do this practice. And by means of this practice, one comes to a very high level. Ashrei sheyochaz bazeh. Happy is the person who grabs this, or we would say in smoother English, a little less literal. It's a great thing to be able to adopt and carry on this practice. While the text, that's the end of the text. That's the end of this paragraph of Rabbi Nachman, which is, a classic paragraph that is cited as Rabbi Nachman on Hitbodedut. I'm going to summarize. Make a fixed time every day. Rabbi Nachman says an hour, which could mean a period of time, where in a private place you talk to God and say whatever is in your heart, whatever your psychological, emotional, spiritual state of the moment is. And even if you feel like, I don't know that I don't know if I believe in what I'm doing, Rabbi Nachman says, then pray on that. And that's what you should tell God. Okay? So it's not that we need to clear some theological barrier in order to do this, says Rabbi Nachman. You do not need to be on some spiritual level in order to do this, says Rabbi Nachman. The point is you need to speak to God daily, separate from davening, separate from fixed prayer services, from the place where you are at that moment. Do it from the heart and do it in the language that is familiar to you. Stop sharing now. And I think I need to stop at 8:45 today in 5 minutes. I just want to pause for thoughts, questions, or comments. So this is one Hasidic master on what we would call, I don't know if we would call it or not, better just call it Hitbodedut, but we might translate into English as spiritual meditation daily, We'll read another one next week. That's kind of a different approach. But this is the classic Rabbi Nachman. Thoughts, questions, comments. And you may have read some other Hasidic people who say, they get quoted on high holidays, who say, you should scream, you should cry. There are other Hasidic masters who say this should actually be, Rabbi Nachman doesn't quite make it clear in this passage. He does talk about it elsewhere. You should do this aloud, right? Which most of us would probably not be used to and might feel awkward about, right? And it's not recommended aloud because God doesn't hear, okay? That's not what's behind it. But there is somehow something that is seen to be activated in the person if you say it aloud differently than your thoughts. So a lot of the Hasidim do talk about you should do this aloud. This is part of why you have to do it privately, because you're talking, and they talk about, you're screaming, you're crying, all this. It's sort of like, I don't know, some version of don't know. They didn't go to therapy. They didn't go to therapy. They didn't go to a meditation class. This is what Rabbi Nachman recommends. Pause.
Is there advice perhaps elsewhere as to subjects one might bring forth during this period? Can you ask for things, be angry?
Yeah. So he said that in short form. This does get amplified elsewhere. It's not the only paragraph in Rabbi Nachman. It's like a huge, vast corpus that talks about it. But I'm going to go back to this. And 1 second. I think it would be addressed in, I think the answer to your question is addressed in short form. Okay, there is, in short form, everything that is in your heart, you should express and tell to God. Remorse or repentance, regret, I screwed up, pleas for anything, everyone according to your level. I'm pretty sure Rabbi Nachman would say, wherever you are at the moment, right? So the whole point of this, I think, this is sort of the unspoken part of it, is the Siddur gives you a sort of menu, like these are the selections, they're fixed. And even though we've spoken about places in the Siddur where you're encouraged to add your own individual prayers, like in all the middle paragraphs of the Amidah, or after the last blessing of the Amidah, or in Tachnun. So even though the Talmudic tradition recognizes all of these places where we're encouraged to innovate or add personal things, Rabbi Nachman says this is a different thing. This is where there's no menu. There's no fixed order, okay? It all comes from you, from where you are at the moment. So that could be sadness, anger, pain, asking for things. He would say, if you don't believe in what you're doing, just asking to have a better understanding of God, to feel closer to God. Dear God, I don't feel close to you. I don't know why I'm doing this. I want to feel close to you so that I can feel that this is authentic. If that's what you're feeling, that's what you're feeling. So it could be anything. And this is the key why it's got to be in your native tongue. He says, because you speak your native tongue, then you're really able to articulate what you're really thinking and feeling. I don't know. I suppose if I were some sort of musician, which I'm not, then I might say, well, I play music because that's what I'm really feeling at the moment. But I'm doing it for the purpose of connecting with God, having a relationship with God. Does that answer your question, Carl? I think that's the answer. The answer is whatever there is. Dear God, I don't believe in you. Dear God, I'm angry at the state of the world, right? Whatever you want to talk about. Other question, comment? Quick question, comment? So I would encourage people, it's a big ask that Rabbi Nachman does. This is his recommendation. So I'd encourage people to, I have to say, I don't do this. I'm going to try to do this between this week and next week. I'm going to do my best, bli neder, as we say, no promises, to try to do this and see how I encourage everyone to try this practice and see how you experience it. Okay, we're going to ring off for today. Next week, God willing, we'll meet in our last Tuesday before Pesach.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.